Welcome everyone, this is Tactical Lich here, and today we have a slightly different video. In fact, you might notice the length of this video is much longer than usual. That's because we are doing not one replay, not a best of 3, but a full-on best of 7. Courtesy to Ninya, inviting me to play a best of 7 against him. And in this best of 7, there are some great plays, there are some bad plays, there are even some meme builds, but most importantly, it was a very fun game. I was kind of dying in the middle of it because it was starting quite late for my time zone due to time zone differences and schedule issues, but the adrenaline just kept on pumping, and I was really thankful for Ninya for playing with me for this best of 7. So the battles will be a little bit different here. I will not do timestamps to not spoil any battles, and I will be rather quick in the army builds and the post-battle screen. The audio will be slightly more scuffed than usual because I do not have as much time to edit, so please bear with it. Anyways, without further ado, let's grab some popcorn and drinks, sit back and hop straight into the first battle. In the first battle, Ninya was the first one to picking Wood Elves. I think he was banning Dwarves, so that left me to freely choose the Britonians, the one perfect counter against the Wood Elves. We have a front line of Battle Pilgrims and Peasant Mobs, just to hold down any Wood Elf infantry. At the back, 4 Peasant Bowmen, Fire Arrows and Pox Arrows mixed together, and at the back, we have a bunch of Knights of the Realm, Defenders of Fleur-de-Lis, and more Knights of the Realm protecting the rear. In the middle, we have a couple Field Trebuchets to provide the artillery fire to smash apart the Wood Elf infantry and skirmishers. As for leadership, we have a Paladin on horseback, a Live Damsel on horseback with Regrowth and Earthblood, as well as my favorite Britonian Lord, Réponse de Lyonnaise. As for my opponent Ninya here bringing the Wood Elves, we have a Glade Lord with Prayer of Anathema and Arrows of Kurnus. We have Way Watchers in the front line, protected by some Wild Riders. At the back, a full line of Eternal Guards with shields, and a single unit of Zotes, anti-large armor piercing. Also, they have magic attacks to ignore the physical resistance of Grail Knights. We also have a single Branch Wraith, and that's basically it. Now, with my artillery advantage, I was able to bombard their infantry with my trebuchets, while my opponent Ninya here pushing up the Way Watchers, hoping to get a good sniping attempt on my units, but my 4 units of Peasant Bowmen will probably destroy them in a big hurry. Now, Glade Lord floating a little too close to the front line, exposing herself to a whole bunch of Peasant Bowfire, taking some minor damage as she is now flying away. And at the front line, the Way Watchers have exposed themselves, strolling a little too close to the front line, as the Peasant Mobs will be revealing them from stealth, providing a perfect line of sight for my ranged units. And now they will be subjected to the counterfire from the Peasant Bowmen with Fire Arrows and Pox Arrows, eating some nasty damage, especially with the focus fire from the Field Trebuchets as well. One of the Field Trebuchets ate some firepower from the Glade Lord, including an Arrows of Kurnus, losing some HP. The Glade Lord did some damage, but that's not a huge issue as I did not suffer any artillery model losses. While I was able to do some massive damage onto the Way Watchers, only to that, but a lot of HP damage. Not exactly a great engagement. So in the front line, we have the Wild Riders charging into the Peasant, hoping to get a nice engagement and run down these Peasants, but a counter-charge from the Knights of the Realm quickly pushed the Wild Riders off the Peasants' back, as my Peasant Bowmen are now focusing down all these poor Wild Riders, already down to 60% of their health. My opponent here is just not getting a good engagement anywhere on the battlefield, as the infantry do not really want to get close by just yet due to all my firepower, especially the few trebuchets, while the Wild Riders and the Zotes cannot really get into the artillery and my bow line. So Ninya here just basically trying to poke down my Peasant Bowmen so that the other forces can push in without getting hit by all this archer fire. On the other hand, Wild Riders running in yet again trying to run down the Peasant Mobs, but my Battle Pilgrims are ready for countercharge. In the middle, we have some Zotes here charging into the Peasant Mobs, and the Knights of the Realm doing some massive anti-large damage with their giant stone clubs. But unfortunately for them, the combination of anti-large from the Knights of the Realm and Réponse de Lyonnaise charging into the fray is just too much for these Zotes. They cast an Earthblood onto themselves, trying to hold in combat, but that is just not enough. So they will be promptly pushed away as they do not have the best leadership. Wild Riders attempting to run down my Peasant Bowmen, but my Reserve Knights of the Realm are charging in, running into the backs of these Wild Riders, Going for a pitch engagement here, all the Wild Riders are caught by my Knights of the Realm and my character squads, and basically that's it for the Wood Elf mobility, as the Wild Riders are all caught in this engagement run down by all my Knights, while the Way Watchers taking some heavy losses from the Peasant Bowfire and the Trebuchets, chased down by the Peasant Mobs. Finally, Ninya pushing up the Spears, but it might be a little too late, as the Way Watchers will be run down by my Knights now that the mobility of the Wood Elves are gone. The Glade Lord is still floating in the skies, but at this point, Ninya decided to throw in the towel. Now for a quick rundown for army performances, we have a Peasant Mob just basically absorbing damage, Battle Pilgrims charging forward but not a lot of engagement. Mainly the damage was dealt by the Peasant Bowmen, doing some really cost-effective damage against the Way Watchers, and that one Knight of the Realm sacrificing themselves to charge down some Zotes, while the bombardment from the Trebuchets dished out some insane damage against the infantry and some of the cavalry, taking out a few Wild Riders in the early game, and of course the Way Watchers. So in the end, Ninya's Way Watchers weren't able to do a lot of damage, as they were only able to shoot at peasant bows and taking a lot of returning fire. The Zotes are not exactly a good unit with low leadership, not exactly the greatest armor and pretty poor combat stats. They just get charged down easily by anti-large cavalry and get shot down pretty easily by peasants as well. Same goes for the Wild Riders, a very squishy glass cannon unit. In this matchup, they just get absolutely trashed on by Knights of the Realm and shot up by Peasant Bowmen. So unfortunately, this is just a poor matchup for Ninya here, with the Wood Elves being counterpicked by the Britonian forces. Now let's move on to the second battle and see whether Ninya can recover from this defeat. And now here we are at the second battle. I was picking Vampire Counts first, and Ninya counterpicked with High Elves. Now you might know that I have devised a build against the Phoenix Guard box for the High Elves, so I was rather confident in my build, especially when I'm one game ahead by a pretty large margin in the first game as well. Now spoiler alert, this confidence is my downfall, leading to some fatal mistakes. Now let's have a quick rundown of both armies' composition. For my army, I have 1 regular Grave Guard and 4 Grave Guard with great weapons, 5 zombies in the front, and at the back we have 2 Blood Knights protecting the Corpse Cards with Balefire. As for leadership, we have a Vampire with Law of Shadows coming in with Occam's Mind Razor, while the Lord will be the Blood Dragon variant, with Helm of Discord, Dance Macabre, Invocation of Nahak, and Zombie Summons. As for my opponent Ninya's army with the High Elves, we have a Frostheart Phoenix, an Arcane Phoenix, and an Alariel the Radiant, a triple bird flying goon squad. And at the back we have 3 Phoenix Guards, one of them the Keepers of the Flame, a single Spearman, and 3 Rangers. Basically bringing less Phoenix Guards to get more infantry support. And with the army builds done, let's go back to normal speed and see how the battle unfolds. Now since both armies do not have any range component, we are going to push forward and converge on this ridge in the middle of the battlefield, while my Blood Knights are here at the back, preventing any dive bombing with the Arcane Phoenix and the Frostheart Phoenix. Without any opening to dive down, the Arcane Phoenix dropped the Flamestorm here into a bunch of Grave Guards with great weapons. It is doing some nice HP damage and also killing a few models here and there. Nothing too substantial, but basically free damage for the High Elves. Now let's do a bit of a fast forward, as both armies are suffering a bit of a speed debuff due to pushing uphill. Ninya here, seeing my zombies, decided to push forward the Rangers to clear out my chaff, which is a great decision. Also, he's going aggressive, going wide with his infantry, going for a full line engagement instead of a traditional box formation. With this widespread formation here, Ninya was able to prevent my Blood Knights having an easy time to flank around, and now this is where my mistake happens. I dropped an Occam's Mind Razor here. I thought I dropped a Dance Macabre as well, but I did not, probably cancelling it in the middle of the ability cast and switched over to the Helm of Discord here. So in the end, I got the damage buff, I got the Occam's Mind Razor magic damage, but I did not have the attack stats to punch through all these Phoenix Guards melee defense, so the Grave Guards are still doing limited damage to the Phoenix Guards. Yes, the damage is decent, but Alariel is still healing them up extremely fast, especially in the middle here. The Grave Guards not exactly putting a huge dent in the Keepers of the Flame due to the Star of Avalon. The second big mistake comes in the form of my Blood Knights micro here. I was way too conservative with them, not flanking around, instead charging them straight into the middle, through my own man, dampening the charge and not exactly getting a good surround due to all the infantry support for the single entities for my opponent. suffering a bunch of damage in return. Right now, I'm finally realizing that I need to circle around with my Blood Knights and do some flanking charges, but it is a little bit too late as my Grave Guards, some of them are already taking substantial losses, and in the middle, my Vampire Lord of Blood Dragon is getting almost sniped out by Alariel the Radiant and the Double Phoenix. The Grave Guards with great weapons in the middle are still in decent shape, holding back the Phoenix Guards, while the Blood Knights, finally moving into position, have commenced rear charging into the backs of the High Elf infantry. But coincidentally, the engagement is happening in the middle of the ridge, so these Blood Knights are doing an uphill charge. They are not exactly doing the max damage, not having the best charging speed, and the impact damage is limited. And the Phoenix Guard are still standing, especially the Keepers of the Flame, while my Blood Dragon Lord is holding on to his dear life right now, dropping in another Invocation of Nahak, attempting to heal back up, along with some of his Grave Guards. But really, he's almost at his heal cap, while the single entities are just relentlessly pursuing him, bullying him with their massive size. In the middle, the Phoenix Guard, albeit taking massive losses, they are still holding, especially Keepers of the Flame, still above half health. And on the flanks, finally the Grave Guards are successful in pushing off the Rangers, but the Rangers sacrifice their lives to buy time in the middle for the Goon Squads to snipe out my Lord, as well as the Keepers of the Flame to slowly grind down my meteor part of my army, the Grave Guard with great weapons. Most of them have taken almost complete losses, especially the ones on the side not receiving any healing throughout the battle. Blood Knights here continuously doing some cycle charging, but they are cycle charging into anti-large infantry, so with every impact they are suffering model losses and HP losses, and even against spears this is still not a great engagement. And in the middle, finally my Blood Dragon Vampire Lord is at his heal cap, while the three single entities of the High Elves are still running and kicking, supported by the Keepers of the Flame. And I do not have a lot of methods to kill them all out right now, due to my mistakes in the earlier game. Mistakenly cancelling the Danse Macabre crippled my chances to win the infantry engagement. And now a second Star of Avalon is dropped into this fray, keep healing up the single entities' health, keeping them nice and healthy, while my Blood Knights is having a last Invocation of Nahak, as my Blood Dragon Vampire Lord will soon go down. Taking another hit down to 350 HP, he will not survive until the next spell cast. Without any infantry support other than some zombie summons in here, the Blood Dragon Lord is fighting well and truly alone. Isolated, singled out by the High Elf single entities, and now 93 HP. A single charge from Arcane Phoenix or the Frostheart Phoenix will be more than enough to finish him off. And with one last hit, down he goes. Without the leadership, without the magic support, my vampire army will not be able to finish off all these Phoenix Guards. As you can see here, the balance of power is noticeably more favorable for the High Elves, especially with the single entities completely healthy while the vampire leadership is all dead. Grave Guards without Danse Macabre to support are no match for Phoenix Guards. My Blood Knights, who are basically running on fumes here, no longer have what it takes to finish off all three single entities. So let's fast forward as the single entities and the Phoenix Guard slowly grind away my remaining infantry. The Balefire Corpse cards have been doing their job, limiting the healing from Alariel, but still that is not enough without the killing power, and the vampire army will crumble under army losses. Now let's do a quick rundown of the army performances. The Grave Guards still did alright, however they would have done so much more with Van House Danse Macabre buffing up their attack stats, and in the end, without the attack buff they were not able to penetrate the Phoenix Guards, enabling them to do some massive damage value, one of them getting 3000 damage on the Blood Knights, on my characters, and of course on the Grave Guards. And with the Phoenix Guards fighting on top of the ridge, forcing the Blood Knights to repeatedly run uphill for the cycle charges. The Blood Knights were exhausted faster than usual, also their impact damage was lowered due to the uphill charges, not able to do as much damage as they can on flat ground. As for my hero squads, due to the lack of support from the Grave Guards as they were unable to kill off the Phoenix Guards, the single entities from the High Elf army was able to single them out and snipe them off one by one, while being supported by the Phoenix Guard, especially with the Guardian from Keepers of the Flames, providing physical resistance to Ilariel. Balefire, despite limiting magic regeneration for the High Elves, it wasn't really enough as the Phoenix Guards were still able to carry the game. As for the Rangers, they did okay in clearing out the zombie chaff and buying time for single entities to snipe out my leadership, and I also like how Ninya going for a wide approach instead of stationing in a box. The proactive push for the Rangers put a slight restraint on my flanking maneuvers there, blocking some of my Grave Guards, as well as delaying the Blood Knights, forcing them to go around for a further detour before hitting the High Elves in the rear. One thing of note is that the Frostheart Phoenix is actually really good in this kind of block fights, as the aura it possesses does lower the melee attack of the Undead troops, limiting their effectiveness against the elite High Elves. So Ninya will be taking back one victory in the second game with a nice mix of different infantry of the High Elves as well as the single entities. Now let us move on to the next battle. And now we are on the third battle with Ninya picking the Empire and I'm counter-picking with the Chaos Army. For army builds, we have a front line of Chaos Marauders supported by a bunch of Chaos Warriors with halberds, also a single unit of Aspiring Champions for a little bit of a leadership buff. As for leadership, we have Prince Sigvald the Magnificent and a Death Sorcerer, only with Spirit Leech. And for the flank over here, we are preparing for a flank overload with Forsaken, protected, screened out by a bunch of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes and Horse Masters. 5 units of skirmishing cavalry ready to hunt down Pistoliers and other pesky Empire skirmish cavalry. Now for the Empire from Ninya, we have a front line of a mixture of Flagellant, Sigmar Sons, and Greatswords, capable of beating back a bunch of Marauders and using the armor piercing on these Greatswords to hunt down the armored infantry of the Chaos Army. At the back we have some Empire Knights to protect the back line, one of them also a Knight of the Blazing Sun, the more elite version of Empire Cavalry. A single unit of great cannons for the armor-piercing firepower. In the front, we have a bunch of Pistoliers to screen out Marauder Cavalry, and a single unit of Outriders with grenade launchers. These guys actually pack a massive punch against the lightly armored Marauder Cavalry, and they will be doing some devastating explosive damage despite being called anti-infantry. As for Empire leadership, we have of course a very standard legendary Lord pick. Volkmar Grimm, of course the powerhouse lord of the Empire roster. As for the spellcasting department, we have a single Amethyst Wizard, also coming in with nothing but Spirit Leech. So it is gonna be a battle of Spirit Leech, and now let's get the battle started. Now both armies are not short on skirmishing cavalry. Empire has Pistoliers and Chaos have Marauder Horsemen. It's gonna be a little bit of back and forth skirmish trade. Chaos Army, despite being numerous, are short on artillery fire, so they will be pushing forward, trying to meet the Empire in hand-to-hand combat, while the skirmish cavalry will be pushing ahead. Now you might realize this scene is a bit familiar, as I did make it into my 1-minute tactics video a few weeks ago. I was using the numbers and melee advantage of the Marauder Horsemen to basically herd these Pistoliers towards the white line, corner them, and hunt them down in melee combat so that I won't be suffering any more bullet shots to the face. Same goes for the other flank, as my Marauder Horsemen and Horsemasters are pushing forward, pushing these Pistoliers away. However, they do not have enough numbers here to really hunt them down and corner them on the white line, so they will be pulling back a bit, eating some skirmish fire from the Pistoliers. Now back to the middle where the main forces are. Chaos Sorcerer of Death eating a few cannonballs have taken quite some damage, so he'll be hiding behind these buildings, away from the line of sight of the cannon crew, and wait for a more timely moment to start pushing forward and dropping some Spirit Leech. A banishment from Volkmar gone down in anticipation of these Chaos Infantry, but unfortunately I spotted that cast and pulled back the Chaos Marauders. In the end, this banishment cast did nothing other than delaying my army's advance. At the corner, the Pistoliers are being hunted down by the Chaos Marauders, with the Marauder horses cutting them off from all escape routes. They will be soon dealt with in melee combat, as I'm gonna catch them in the white line. Now on the flank, the Forsaken overload was not going as planned at all. The Empire Cavalry riding out, charging their Knights of Blazing Sun straight into the Forsaken unit, doing some massive impact damage. And now they will be pulling out of combat and charge down another unit of Forsaken. But the problem is the first Forsaken they charge is still hot in pursuit, trying to surround them in melee combat and drag them down. And with the massive 60 weapon strength on these Forsaken unit, even with the high 100 armor on the Knights of Blazing Sun, will not be enough to save them, as they are now taking significant damage in the melee engagement. As for the front line, the Chaos Marauders are pushing forward, driving themselves into the unbreakable troops of the Empire. Now, one of them is a bit lagging behind and will now get charged by the Flagellants, but the other are doing some decent damage against the Sigmar Sons and also the Flagellants. Even the Chaos Warriors have pushed themselves into combat using their heavy armor to tank out damage from the Flagellants, buying time for the rest of the Chaos army to flank around, maybe hunt down the cannon crew and whatnot. On the far side, Chaos Skirmish Cavalry have dealt with the Pistoliers, so they will be quickly returning, hoping to hunt down the Outriders and the Cannon Crew, as the grenades are decimating my throwing axes. And on the other flank, the Skirmishing Cavalry are still battling, with one of the Chaos Marauder horsemen with throwing axes being routed off, but now Pistoliers are being tied down by the Marauder Horsemasters, and they are no match against the Marauders in terms of melee combat. Back to the front line, the Amethyst Wizard has casted some spells, but it's not like he has a lot of choices. So Prince Sigvald getting hit by the Spirit Leech will be getting drained out of health, but of course he has regeneration, so it is not exactly a big deal, while the Chaos Warriors with Halberds are just tanking damage and slowly grinding down the Flagellants and Sigmar Sons. Well, at the back here, the Outriders on grenade launchers launching their shots into the aspiring champions and actually probably doing more friendly fire to their own Sigmar Sons. The grenade launchers will be caught by the Marauder Horsemasters and soon hunted down in melee combat. A banishment gone down straight down the line on these Chaos Warriors of Halberds, terrifying them with the Volkmar the Grimm's wagon, and it will be pushed off for now, leaving Sigvald the Magnificent all on his own in this melee blob fight. But Sigvald is absolutely fine. Prince Sigvald with Slippery on that 24 melee defense buff will be helping him tanking out the damage from the Sigmar Sons, and he is heavily armored after all. Another Spirit Leech gone down, but it will be mitigated by the regeneration, while the Chaos Sorcerer of Dav should probably activate soon to start using up that Winds of Magic reserve. Now, some of the Empire Knights came back after pushing off some of my Marauder Horsemasters and Forsaken Infantry, but now they will be hunted down by the Marauder Skirmish Cavalry. Javelin Cavalry are actually surprisingly effective against armored knights, with decent armor piercing in every shot. Now back to the front line here, we have the Great Swords protecting the Cannon Crew from the Forsaken charge, but there are just so many Chaos Infantry left. They're surrounding the Cannon Crew. One Great Swords is not enough to cover all flanks, and now these Chaos Marauders will be getting into melee combat, catching the Cannon Crew as the Great Swords were slightly out of position. Volkmar the Grim, always a solid infantry grinder here, just rolling in and out of combat, running over some of the Chaos Marauders, but there are just so many infantry here, and Sigvald is still a massive threat as the Empire infantry dwindles. So Volkmar the Grim charging into combat, dropping a Soulfire bombardment onto my Chaos Infantry, but Prince Sigvald is here to challenge Volkmar to hand-to-hand combat with heroic killing blow active. Up to 780 weapon strength, even the 100 armor on the Volkmar the Grim will not be able to save him from the massive attack damage from Prince Sigvald. Now at the back, the Cannon Crew is routed off. The Great Swords, unable to save the Cannon Crew, will be routing the Chaos Marauders in revenge, but now they're exposed to the Javelin fire from the Horsemasters, chipping away their health with the decent armor piercing on the Javelins. Now back to the front line, Volkmar the Grim rolling over combat, trying to psycho charge Sigvald to death with the support of Great Swords, but is not exactly successful as he is now exposed to the Javelin fire of a lot of these Marauder Horsemasters, psycho charging as the Great Swords are left in melee combat against the aspiring champions. Volkmar the Grim is being chased by Sigvald, who is desperately trying to hunt him down, but Sigvald, being only on his feet, would not be able to catch up with Volkmar on his Volkswagen. Although the large hitbox of the Volkswagen does leave him rather vulnerable to Javelin fire. At the back, the Amethyst Wizard is roaming around the battlefield, being hunted down by the Marauder Horsemasters and taking some damage in melee combat. A Spirit Leech is going down on Volkmar the Grim, but his magic resistance will help aid him in tanking out the damage from the spell. And now the final pitch engagement happens as both sides are throwing in all their units into a single blob. Heroes, infantry, skirmish cavalry, both sides are going all in. Volkmar the Grim charging yet again into melee combat, but taking another hit from Prince Sigvald. His health is dropping, and all the melee staying power of the Empire is routed, with the Great Swords being broken by a rear charge from the Marauder Horsemasters. Amethyst Wizard as well, being routed off, will be chased away by the Marauder Horsemasters. Really, there's nothing left for the Empire army there other than the unbreakable Volkswagen, whose poor melee stats is no match for Prince Sigvald. Volkmar the Grim is still fighting valiantly, but now he's tied down by a bunch of Horsemasters, being pinned down by the Cavalry and now being hit by a Spirit Leech as well. Sigvold also getting his hands onto the Volkswagen here. With Heroic Killing Blow active yet again, Volkmother Grimm will be going down. And that shall spell the end for the Empire army. Now let's have a quick rundown of the army performances. For the Chaos army, the Marauders didn't really do much here as they were fighting some superior infantry. However, the Aspiring Champions, they have pretty decent melee stats and were able to hold the line. Same goes for the Chaos Warriors with Halberd. And the Forsaken here, mostly being cleaned up by the Greatsword, really didn't do too much other than dragging down the Knights of the Blazing Sun. The MVP for the Chaos army really goes to these guys. I would say arguably the best unit in the whole Chaos roster, even better than Prince Sigvold, the Chaos Marauder Horse Masters. 1,700 value, 700, almost 800 value for these guys, 1 chevron on each unit. Honestly, they were able to do so much here, pushing off the Pistoliers, focusing down Volkmother Grimm, using their javelins to soften up the great swords and hunting down the Empire Knights, using their mobility advantage and their melee stats to push off the Outriders with grenade launchers, as well as hunting down some great cannon crew. This mid-tier light mobility that is still decent in melee is crucial to Chaos, as they need something to bridge the gap between the expensive Chaos Knights and the cheap but trashy Chaos Warhounds. And of course, Prince Sigvold here able to do some massive damage against Volkmother Grimm thanks to Heroic Killing Blow and his impressive melee stats, 70 attack, 60 defense, and Volkmother Grimm on his wagon only having 30 attack and definitely less than that for melee defense. Volkmar is great at clearing out blob fights, but against a one-on-one duel, Volkmar stand no chance against Prince Sigvold the Magnificent. Now for the rest of the Empire army, we have a bunch of Flagellants and Sigmar Sun's Great Swords here. Great Swords doing well to clean up a bunch of Forsaken, but when they're fighting against Marauders, they're not exactly earning back the value. And the Heavy Cavalry just got hunted down by the Forsaken and a combination of throwing axes and javelins. As for the Pistoliers, they got pushed off in melee by a bunch of Marauder Horsemasters and the Marauder Axe Cavalry. Outriders able to do some massive damage, obliterating one of my Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, but they got caught in melee and get pushed off and hunted down to their last men. Cannon crew did some decent damage against my Death Sorcerer, but other than that they got caught in melee by the Forsaken as well as the Chaos Marauders. And that's basically it for the third battle. I was able to take back 1 victory, and now let us move on to the 4th game. Now for the 4th battle, we are bringing a not so conventional army with Imrik on foot and 4 War Lions. Yes, I want to try out the War Lion spam army against the Dark Elf, but it seems that we do not have such luck for using them effectively in this battle, as my opponent Ninya here is bringing a rather standard Dark Elf build with Marathi in the skies, accompanied by a couple of Manticores, and of course Marathi bringing Soul Stealer, Heart Render, and a bunch of his other spells like the Doom Bolt and debuffs. Now, we also have triple Skirt Runner Chariots. These Skirt Runners will be very effective against my War Lions, as the War Lions with low armor and being a large unit, they will be subjected to the anti-large bonus on these Skirt Runner Chariots missiles and be hunted down in deadly efficiency. Now for the rest of the Dark Elf build, we have a front line of 3 Dread Spears, one of them the Hellebroni, and a bunch of Code 1 Knights, some of them hidden in the forest, and we also have a couple Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. A lot of missile pressure here, and it will be a very tough build for my War Lions to deal with. Now as for the High Elf build, other than Footrake and the 4 War Lions, we have a front line of Rangers to clean up the Dark Elf infantry. At the back we have a backbone of anti-large 3 Spearmen units, hopefully holding back the Chariots and pinning down Manticores and whatnot. We also have a couple Illyrian Reavers to counteract the Dark Rider mobility of the Dark Elves, and that's basically it for the army builds. Let's get the battle started, as we have our Illyrian Reaver archers firing into the Dark Elf units already, doing some skirmishing work. Now, there are a couple Dark Riders, the melee variant, forward deployed in the rear of my formation, so they will be flanking around and enveloping this flank. So I will be countercharging with some of my Illyrian Reavers as they are eating some Dark Rider crossbow bolts. They will be charging into the Dark Riders, and accompanied by some War Lions, they will be shredding all these puny Dark Riders. Cold One Knights also surging out from the forest, charging into the Rangers, doing some massive damage, and now getting in contact with the Illyrian Reaver Archers, doing some nice anti-cavalry damage. But the Dark Rider push is now defeated by a combination of Illyrian Reavers and also War Lions. Of course, I did not win this engagement without losses. Both Reavers have taken significant damage, as especially one of them are getting hunted down by the Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. Now, despite the balance of power slightly ebbing towards my favor, the real engagement begins as Morathi and the Double Manticore dives down, trying to hit all the Spearmen and Rangers with the Morathi's debuff. You can see that their attack lowering down to 12, really having minimal hit chance, even hitting against something like, say, Feral Manticore. And Morathi, despite being debuffed by the Lord of Dragons, still having a decent block chance against the Rangers and the Spears. And with the Soul Stealer dropping down, all these units are getting some significant damage dealt with, especially the War Lions eating a bunch of anti-lodge bolts from the Scourge Runners, and the Dark Riders have been shredding my units with their armor-piercing crossbows. The whole time, the missile damage on these guys are really no joke. In the middle, Morathi summoned a Doom Bolt, shooting straight into the Mage of Life here, taking out a chunk of her health, and now two Manticores hunting her down relentlessly, and now I have lost my spell support, at least momentarily, despite that she should be coming back at some point. And without the spell support, both Manticores are just hounding my leadership core here, as Limerick is taking some beating from a combination of Morathi, double Feral Manticores, and all three Chariots charging into the combat, basically overloading my whole middle anchor. And over here, the Cold One Knights charging in, being pinned down by some of my War Lions and Spears. They will be taking some damage, but they will soon pull through and start hounding my cavalry. And you can see here, with a combination of Soul Stealers, the debuff from Morathi, and a constant pressure from the missiles from the Dark Riders with repeater crossbow, most of my mobility are routed off, and the balance of power is ebbing against my favor, especially with the healing on top of Morathi. And now, only with Spearmen holding the front line and Imric being routed, my whole army is falling into disarray, into a rather dire situation. In the front line, the Scourge Runners, being victorious in the engagement, are now free to roam around the battlefield, routing all my infantry with their anti-infantry bonus. Even the War Lions of Trace was not able to pin them down with their mass, as the War Lions, having rather low melee attack, only 30, is not exactly effective in fighting anything without the infantry size, without that anti-infantry bonus. And now the War Lions will be routed. While at the back, a regrowth is dropped onto Imric, trying to keep that balance of power high and keep our leadership healthy, but will be counteracted by a Soul Stealer and also a lot of Dark Rider with repeater crossbow and armor-piercing fire, shredding the remaining health of Imric. Now, some War Lions who were chasing off some routing Dark Riders have regrouped, charging straight back into these Dark Riders with repeater crossbow, routing them momentarily, but now will be overloaded by a bunch of Cold One Knights, Feral Manticore, and also Morathi herself, taking some significant damage, and without any leadership support, they will be routed soon enough. At the back, there are some regrouped Spears, Lions, and Rangers trying to get back into the combat, but they will be routed, or at least delayed, by all the Spears and Scourge Runners, while Imric, after taking some major HP damage after eating that precise Doom Bolt, he is routed by the Morathi Goon Squad. And with that, you can see that the balance of power is really against my favor here. And let's just go fast forward, as it is basically cleanup action. All my mobility are gone. All that remains are some Spears and Rangers, and that will be the end of the High Elf army. For a quick rundown of battle performances, Ninya here did really good with Morathi. The constant Soul Stealer, the Doom Bolt did massive damage to my key units, earning over 3,000 gold, and especially Morathi's debuff basically rendered all my infantry and War Lions useless. You can see here, most of the War Lions didn't even recover their cost, and the infantry here only managed to push off some Dread Spears, but unable to do too much damage against Feral Manticores, allowing them to dish out some massive damage, 1 chevron and 1,200 gold on this one. And the War Lions were not able to limit the Scourge Runner Chariots, as the Scourge Runner Chariots were just rolling over my infantry and using those anti-large missiles to basically shoot my War Lions to death. The Dark Riders did some good damage, constantly shooting at my key units. My Warlands, my Illyrian Reavers all take massive damage from the crossbows. And the Cold One Knights, this one did some massive damage to my Warlands as well, being anti-large and using their charge bonus to hunt down my mobility. I really had no good solutions to these armored cavalry, especially when my spears are debuffed by Morathi's abilities. Overall, Ninya did a great job using the Scourge Runner Chariots and Feral Manticores as well as Morathi to their full potential. The decisive charge of the Scourge Runner Chariots, winning out in that mobility engagement, pushing back all my War Lions and Illyrian Reavers, even rolling over my Rangers and Spears, and then using the single entities to isolate my leadership, my Mage of Life and Imrik, bullying them around with the mass advantage, successfully killing off most of my key units. I would say this build I brought over here probably works better if my Dark Elf opponent bring a more infantry heavy build with something say Executioners and Blackguards. Maybe the anti-infantry armor piercing Warlines will do a little bit more good, but over here with so many large units, we have the Cold One Knights, the Scourge Runners and the Feral Manticores. The Warlines only having 30 attack, especially after the debuffs from Morathi's abilities, probably down to something like say 15-20 melee attack, will be far from enough to punch through the melee defenses of the Scourge Runners and Feral Manticores and especially Morathi herself. So I've definitely made a big mistake in army pick. And with that, Ninya brought back another victory and it's now 2 against 2. Now on the 5th battle, we have an Empire versus Britonia game. I was picking Empire and Ninya counterpicked with the Britonians. Now, just want to say that I'm not exactly a great player at Empire. It is a very easy faction to learn with a lot of tools, very flexible, but it is a rather hard faction to master in my opinion because they do not have the best of tools in any field other than cavalry, and you need to really learn how to use the synergy between different units to maximize their potential, and I'm not exactly great at that. And also, I'm not exactly a frequent Empire player, especially not against the Britonia, so in just the army picks alone, I am in a rather large disadvantage as I scramble to make a random build that I hopefully can counter the Britonians. Now for the army builds, we have a front line of a bunch of spears, a box basically, backed up by some halberdiers to protect the silver bullets. And we also have a couple Empire Knights to protect our artillery pieces, the war wagons, 2 of them, the war wagons with mortars. Now for the leadership, we have a single light wizard and Boris Todbringer. As for Ninya here, actually bring a rather numerous build here with a bunch of yeoman archers mounted rushing towards the flanks, and for the front line we have a lot of peasants, peasant mobs, peasant spears, and at the back some peasant bowmen, pretty standard Britonian stuff. As for cavalry, the most important part, the killing power of the Britonian army, they are bringing 4 questing knights, easily able to cut through the Empire heavy armor with their good melee stats and armor piercing. As for the leadership, of course, it is the Fey Enchantress and the double Paladin squad, a very standard pick for the Britonians. And now let's get the battle going and go back to normal speed. Due to my artillery advantage, I was able to push up the war wagons and start bombarding the peasants here, doing some nice damage. I will be switching the target over to the peasant bowmen soon after, trying to thin out their missile power. The numbers advantage, especially the numbers in mobility of the Britonian, allows them to now encircle my formation with all the cavalry, especially the skirmishers now, going all the way around the battlefield. Now on the flanks, the questing knights are pushing forward, but with the lack of shields, I was able to push up my war wagons, doing some chip damage, killing a model or 2 with my bullet volleys. However, they need time to actually dish out the damage, so they are just slowly chipping away the health of my opposing units. And some of them are already taking some decent damage with the questing knights, but the counter fire from the mounted yeoman archers are now chipping away the health of my Empire Knights and also the war wagons, especially the peasant bowmen are just shooting into the fray. Now the war wagons taking some noticeable damage will be pulling back, avoiding that missile fire. While over here, the questing knights are moving into position, readying to go for a flank overload to run down my spears and halberdiers. I was positioning the silver bullets, hoping they can shoot at the questing knights, but it seems that the line of sight issue is rather prominent as they are not able to fire and shoot at the questing knights. And now the whole Empire army is enveloped by a bunch of peasants, the peasant yeoman archers, and peasant bowmen are firing into my units. And now the paladins and Fae are charging into the fray, hunting down my Empire Knights, who are taking some massive damage from the peasant as well as the paladins. Now Boris charging into combat, hoping to hunt down and pin in their hero squads, but that also caught my war wagons with mortars into the fray, allowing the questing knights to charge in. With the favor of the Fae popped, they're receiving a massive melee attack bonus, up to 70 melee attack on these questing knights, able to hack apart my heavily armored war wagons. At this point, Ninya dropped a preemptive Dwellers Below, and my Empire Knights hoping to charge in, countercharge. The questing knights are being pushed away, a night zoning spell, preventing my Empire Knights to keep charging in to pin down their cavalry, allowing the questing knights to isolate my mortar wagons in melee combat and cut them down one after the other. Now over here, some questing knights were bogged into melee combat by a net and also some spears. They are taking some noticeable damage, but the silver bullets that they're protecting are still failing to fire with the lack of line of sight. All the units we have here are blocking the line of sight towards the Britonian army. The paladins are blocked by the war wagons, and the questing knights are also blocked behind the war wagons. A banishment is dropped by my light wizard here, doing some okay damage to the questing knights, but it is not really saving my front line here, as the spears are just being run over by all the questing knights, barely held back by Boris Todbringer and some halberdiers. And with the halberdiers being dragged away from protecting the silver bullets, now the mounted yeoman archers are free to roam and charge down my vulnerable missile line, and the silver bullets are down for the count. And with that, all my damage dealers are basically shut down other than Boris Todbringer. The halberdiers were able to push off the peasant spears, but that also leaves them exposed to the fire of the peasant bowmen, and now taking massive damage due to their lack of armor and missile block chance. The war wagons are still firing, doing some chip damage here and there, even routing some of the questing knights with the support of some halberdiers and spears, but it is not exactly enough here, as there are more questing knights, 29 models here, 36 models here, rushing in, threatening to focus down Boris Todbringer. And with the silver bullets gone, the balance of power is noticeably in the favor of the Britonians. Some spears push ahead, trying to push off these peasant bowmen, but there will be questing knights returning from routing, charging straight into the spearmen with shields. And in the front line, the last of my halberdiers and spears are routed off by a combination of paladins and peasant spears. The Fae Enchantress as well, using the fear effect to her advantage, routing off the spears, now isolating Boris Todbringer with the paladins and spears, and he is taking massive damage. And with that, you can see that the balance of power is well and truly in my opponent's favor. Boris' leadership is wavering, all my units are routing, some halberdiers and spears are returning but tattered, and with that, the army losses will soon be kicking in, as my light wizard is being surrounded by combat as well, routed and shattered. And Ninya will be claiming a major victory in this one. Now let's have a look at the army performances. We have the Empire Army state troops here. This one actually got some really good engagement against the questing knights, was supported by the light wizard's net. Managed to do some amazing damage against the single entities and the questing knights. However, the rest of the state troops didn't really do well here, as they just got rolled over by a bunch of questing knights, peasants, and arrow fire. As for the silver bullets, I totally misused them, as they did not get a clean line of sight on any cavalry today, and only getting 350 value. The Empire Knights got shredded in questing knights in hand-to-hand combat, so not much to be said. The war wagons did pretty decent though, getting some good value against the questing knights, but unable to carry the game. And the war wagons here not able to do enough damage to the peasant army, and instead got caught by the questing knights, the paladins, in melee combat, and got shut down. Now for the leadership, Boris Todbringer, unable to do too much damage to the characters of Britonia, and got surrounded by questing knights and the paladins. He got outnumbered and overwhelmed. Ninya here did really well with the questing knight push, able to flank around with the peasant yeoman archers as well, shut down my silver bullets using the anti-large and armor-piercing damage from the paladins and the questing knights to clean up my cavalry, my mobility, the war wagons. So overall, really good use with the Questing Knight Cavalry here, shredding through all my units and getting a victory by killing off all my killing power. And with this victory, Ninya is getting a lead with 3 wins against my 2. And I need to win the next battle to get ourselves to a 7th game. And now we are at the 6th battle here, with Ninya rolling with the dwarves, and I'm bringing out the meta faction Beastmen. I need to win this round so that we can go to the 7th game, and Ninya just only need to win this round to get a total victory. With everything on the line, it's time to go for a solid meta build. We have the Ungor herd at the front line, backed up by some Gore herds with shields. At the back, 2 raiders for their missile firepower, and a couple Centaurs with throwing axes to counter any gyrocopters, which Ninya actually brought here with a couple. We also have more mobility in the form of Centaurs with great weapons, regular Centaurs, and more Centaurs with great weapons. And of course, if you're bringing Beastmen, it is rare not to bring these guys. Tuskor Chariots, supported by Brave Shaman of Beast, also on a Tuskor, and also a Beast Lord, also on a Tuskor. Now, he's a relatively cheap lord, but he does have a lot of attack buffs that can provide support to the rest of the army. And I actually covered it in one of my army build videos before. It was out a few months ago, but anyways, let's focus on the battle right now, as my opponent here is opening fire with the gyrocopters with brimstone guns. At the back, a front line of miners with blasting charges, ready to clear out the Ungor raiders with the explosives. At the back, a sturdy back line of longbeards, 2 of them with great weapons, probably ready to cut down the chariots and any bestigors. We also have a couple of flame cannons here. These destructive anti-infantry damage dealing fire throwers will be able to blast away hordes and hordes of the chaff infantry of beastmen, especially since they are lightly armored, being very vulnerable to the explosive damage. And then also 1 unit of slayers guarding the back, supported by Thoric Ironbrow and a single unit of Master Engineer. That's basically it for the army build. Let's see if I can prolong this match into a 7th game, or Ninya will be taking the victory. The battle began with some gyrocopters pushing forward, trying to do some anti-large damage with their brimstone guns, but the counterfire from the Centaurs with throwing axes have been doing some decent damage against the gyrocopters, taking out a bunch of their hit points. The flame cannons have been roaring in lethal temperature, spitting out balls of explosive flames, and stirring all my Ungor herds, doing some significant damage, but that is not exactly an issue here. They're only chaff. They are born to take damage. Instead, I'll be charging my Centaurs into these miners with blasting charges, trying to silence them before they can do too much damage to my army. And my chariot squads will be roaming around the battlefield, rolling through all these miners with blasting charges, doing some massive anti-infantry and armor-piercing damage. While my mobility has been routed off by some of the miners as well as the longbeards who are charging forward, the Centaurs will be pushed away by the Slayers, but this is just fine as they are dragged away from position, allowing my Centaurs and Tuskor Chariots to start roaming into the back lines of the Dawi and shutting down the flame cannons as well as distracting them from firing at least. In the front, we have a bunch of Gore herds with shields and Ungor herds eating a bunch of blasting charges, but that is fine as we are not short in manpower. We have more and more infantry pouring in. The miners, the Akron miners, are silenced by the Gore herds with shields now, while my other Gore herds are pushing forward, trying to go through the gaps and hit the back lines of the Dawi. And now both flame cannons have taken significant damage, one of them totally shut down by all of my chariots just charging straight into them. In the front, we have some longbeards dealing with some Ungor herds, but now being stuck on the anvil. They are being hammered by the Tuskor Chariots. And things are not exactly looking good for the Dawi player here, as the Longbeards with great weapons and Slayers are being dragged out of position by all these Centaurs and Centaurs with throwing axes, being stuck onto some Ungors. The Gyrocopters chasing after the Centaurs with throwing axes are doing some good damage, but they have expended most of their ammo, while the Centaurs have been doing damage to the infantry of the Dawis, getting some decent value. Seeing how their front line crumbled, the dwarf leadership is taking matters into their own hands. Thoric Ironbrow is charging forward, trying to pin down the Throw Manticore that is summoned out of the blue, diving down into the melee combat, trying to snipe out the Master Engineer. At the front, the Longbeards are stuck in melee combat against a sandwich of Ungor herds and Gore herds with shields. They will not be able to get out of combat anytime soon, as my Tuskor Chariots are now free to roam around the battlefield, especially given the lack of Slayer presence, and now they'll be charging into combat against Floric Ironbrow, and the Beast Lord shall drop some crucial buffs to support this whole blob fight. Even the Manticore, who is almost out of summoning time, is up to over 80 melee attack, though Floric will be tanking the damage valiantly. While the Slayers are now finally returning to the middle engagement here, hoping to support their lords. A nice Rune of Wrath and Ruin, blasting my Goreherd infantry and Ungor, and the Slayers will be entering combat with the Rune of Doom buffing their melee attacks, but this is not exactly a favorable trade for them, as my infantry are also buffed by the Horn of the First Beast, being buffed in terms of charge bonus, melee attack and leadership. They are holding their ground against the rear charge from the Slayers. The Goreherds with shields are doing some decent damage against the Slayers. Even the lowly Goreherds and Angors were dishing out some really cost-efficient damage against the lightly armored Dawi infantry. While the whole time my Centaurs, who have returned from routing, are able to now run down all the tattered units of the Dawi here. The Longbeards are being slowly worked down by the Gors and Ungors, as well as my leadership, who are on the Tuskor Chariots with anti-infantry and armor piercing, perfect for destroying the heavily armored Longbeards. Tuskor Chariots are now able to just ping-pong around the battlefield, doing some charge damage to whatever unit they can lay their hands on, while over here, the Gyrocopters, hoping to silence the Ungor Raiders by charging into melee combat, is now surrounded by Centaurs with great weapons, and are now taken out in hand-to-hand melee. In the skies, there is one Gyrocopter left, but is out of ammo, so they will not be too much of an issue for my Beastmen army, who are just dominating the ground forces at this point and cleaning up all the remaining Dawa units. Another Manticore is summoned, accompanied by all the armor-piercing Tuskor Chariots. They will be surrounding Floric and destroying him in combat, and with that, I was able to obtain a victory and get this whole best of 7 match into one final game. Now, before we go into the final battle, let's have a look at the army performances for the Beastmen here. With the support of the Beast Lord, a lot of melee units were able to do pretty well, especially the Goreherd, able to fight off some of the Slayers with the attack buffs, and the Tuskor Chariots also doing really good job. None of them lose any unit models, and one of them getting 1087 damage in a Chevron. The Centaurs did pretty decent as well, this one getting over 1000 damage value. This one got routed off early by the Longbeards and the blasting charges. And overall, the armor-piercing mobility did their job. They shut down the artillery of the dwarves and roam around the backline, destroying all these dwarf infantry with the rear charges. And the Centaurs with throwing axes able to distract the brimstone guns, focusing down some of the gyrocopters with their damage and drag them away, baiting those anti-large armor-piercing fire from my chariots and my single entities. As for Ninya's army, the front line of miners basically got swarmed by my infantry and a bunch of armor-piercing chariots. They were not able to get back too much value as their blasting charges were not used to their full effect. The flame cannons are an interesting pick, however, against all these mobility, there's just not enough infantry to protect these artillery crew. Instead, maybe if Ninya dropped one of the flame cannons and bring one more of the gyrocopters, it might have worked out better. Now the Slayers and some of the Longbeards got dragged out of position by all my Centaurs and basically wasted some of their time going on a merry-go-round. As for the Gyrocopters, they did some okay damage, this one getting a Chevron and almost 1000 value, pretty decent stuff. And Floric as well, getting over 1700 damage, however not enough to pull back the game, as the infantry forces and the missile damage dealers got overwhelmed by my numerous mobility. And now with the army performances complete, let's get into the 7th game and the one final showdown between me and Ninya. Now for the final battle, we are having a Tomb Kings versus Greenskin replay with Ninya picking the Greenskins and I'm picking the Tomb Kings. I do not remember what exactly was the ban pick situation was because it was a while ago. Anyways, we ended up with the Tomb Kings here and we have a rather infantry-centric build and no big monsters. In the front line, we have a bunch of skeleton warriors. In the middle, the Kepler Guard as a sturdy anchor. We also have some skeleton archers protected by skeleton spears and 2 tomb guards with halberds. We have a lot of mobility here in the form of Nihikara horsemen, 2 of them in fact, and 2 more skeleton horse archers. As for leadership, we have a single Tomb Prince protecting Arcanda Black. We also have some artillery here in the form of Cascade of Souls. The screams of the dead will be raining down upon the filthy greenskins, bringing them death and destruction. Now, I did not bring any large monsters in this build because I know that greenskins will be able to snipe them out easily with, say, Dark Line or something, say, large monsters. They have their own Arachnoric spiders, or they can just bring some anti-large, anti-armor piercing cavalry, and also they have the big ones. So even if I bring big monsters, there will be a large target for the greenskins to focus down. Not bringing big monsters will give me a bit more extra funds and a bit of an element of surprise. Now for the greenskin army brought by Ninya here, very standard stuff. We have a lot of savage orcs. They're great for clearing out skeleton chaff. A single unit of the 8-peak loonies, unbreakable, very suitable for the only anchor as for the greenskin front line. We also have some stone trolls here, great armor piercing weapon strength, perfect for hunting down monsters. And at the back, a whole lot of orc air boys here, supported by a single unit of rusty airs. The armor sundering combined with the massive missile strength of these orc air boys will be a huge threat to any big monsters. So thankfully I did not bring any monsters today, no big constructs, so the orc air boys will lost one of their major functions, that is monster hunting. Now for the rest of the build, of course we have the greenskin staples there, like cavalry, mongrels, mangy marauders. The armor piercing missile attacks will be great for sniping out any armored targets, including tomb gods, big monsters and whatnot. We also have some goblin spider rider archers, more wolf rider archers, and at the back we have 2 goblin spider riders, vanguard deployed. Actually one of them is the goblin wolf riders. And that is it for the major army of the greenskins. Of course they are led by the best greenskin lord, Grom the Paunch there, and also supported by a goblin big boss. In the front we also have an orc shaman already casting the Gaze of Mork, aiming at some of my units. Anyways, let's get the battle started, as the Gaze of Mork is going straight into Archon the Black, doing some decent damage, but I'm also retaliating with the screams of the Cascade of Souls, raining death onto the savage orcs, also doing some decent damage. Now the only problem is I do not have any great terror sources to counter the greenskins, so I do have to fight fair and square, using only fear to lower their leadership and win out the melee engagements. Now there's a bunch of the Cavalry Guard being blasted away by the Brain Burster there. Their low armor doesn't do them any good against the greenskin magic trickery. Now on the far flank, we have some Forest Goblin Spider Rider archers doing some skirmishing work, pushing up ahead. And the Vanguard deployed Goblin Wolf Riders and Goblin Spider Riders are thrown into melee combat, trying to tie down the Cascade of Souls before the greenskins suffer too much losses as they slowly march forward to battle. With the protection of the Skeleton Spears and the countercharge of the Nekara Horsemen, as well as my Tomb Guards flooding in to protect the Cascade of Souls, these cowardly goblins simply can't take it anymore and routed away. And they are now even shattered straight out of combat. The Goblin Spider Riders are pushed off as well due to the Nekara Horsemen simply being superior, not losing a single model, just taking some HP damage. But of course the frontline engagement has begun as the Goblins and also Savage Orcs pushing straight ahead into the Skeleton Warriors and the Cavalry Guard, taking some massive charge damage from the Stone Trolls. So the Tomb Guards will be flooding in, trying to pin them down, using their anti-large armor piercing attacks to the full effect. And now there is a strange turn of events. Let's look at the unit card here. Despite being a caster and not exactly the greatest combatant in melee, Archon the Black is actually doing some decent damage to Grom the Paunch. You can see with every hit he's earning quite a bit of value. Another hit goes in thanks to the charge bonus. Archon the Black is actually beating back Grom the Paunch despite him having the Lucky Banner, and the Great Un is here buffing up his melee stats. Grom the Paunch is now pulling out of combat, trying to run down these archers and also run away from the threat of the double single entities of the Tomb Kings, but Archon is not leaving him alone. Another hit goes in, 500 damage value. Hilariously, Grom the Paunch is losing against an ages-old ancient skeletons that's supposed to be crumbling from being the undead and whatnot. It seems that despite Archon the Black is serving Nagash and studying necromancy, he has not been skipping gym and is working intensely on his bone building sessions. Within his skeleton, those are pure muscles. Grom the Paunch pulling out of combat, being hit straight in the back by the Tomb Prince as well, is being pushed off. Let's see the Tomb Prince damage value. only 600, but Arcane the Black combined the Spirit Leech and the melee attacks over 1,000 damage onto Grounded Punch. This is some ridiculous stuff. And in the front line, it seems that the green tide is being stemmed by the sacrifice of the skeleton spears. With the support of some Ninya horsemen, the Savage Orcs is being pushed back, especially with the bombardment coming in from the Cascade of Souls, and it is now switching targets over to the Orc Airboys, pushing off the range pressure of the Greenskins. While over here, the Savage Orcs are being pushed back by the Skeletons, supported by the Ushapti, freeing up these Ninya horsemen to run down the rest of the Greenskin air pressure. Despite being decent melee combatants, the Airboys are still no match for the Ninya horsemen and the combination of the Cascade of Soul bombardment. Some of the Greenskin Airboys are still firing into the fray. The Tomb Gods with shields here does not really care about it. Instead, they are just slowly grinding down the Savage Orcs, and Arcane the Black, returning to the fight, hoping to support his army, is being hit by a combination of Stone Trolls and Orc Shaman. All of them having armor-piercing weapon strength will do some good damage up against Arcane the Black, even with the Liber Mortis on. While the Tomb Prince is all the way back on the end of the map here, pushing off from the punch, single-handedly hunting him down. We do not want him to come back. Back to the blood fight, Tomb Guards are trying to save Arcane by pinning down the Stone Trolls. However, due to their lack of mass is simply being pushed through by all these Stone Trolls, Arcane is now surrounded. At the back, the Ushaptis are successfully pushing off all the Orc Airboys, and also the Ninya Horsemen is just running down all these Orc range pressure. While in the front, Arcane the Black is taking some massive HP losses due to this massive surround from Stone Trolls, Orc Shaman. However, this does give the Tomb Gods the perfect opportunity to slowly drag down all these Stone Trolls. However, it seems that Arcane the Black is not going to survive this for any longer. The Cascade of Souls have been firing the whole game, accumulating some massive damage value over time. And with Arcane the Black going down, the Greenskin decided it's time to leave the battlefield. Army losses kicks in, and I was able to win this final game in a series of best of 7 against Ninya. Now, before we go into the final post-battle analysis, I would like to say a big thanks to Ninya here for playing this best of 7 with me. It was originally intended to be a stream, but with scheduling problems, I have to make it into a video recorded instead. Still, I hope you enjoyed the battles. It was a rather long video, so if you're still watching, I do thank you all viewers for having the patience to go through all the battles and all the post-battle screen. And if you are a new viewer who is interested in more battle replays, feel free to hit the subscribe button and check out the archives. I have some shorter replays, some wild army builds, and also some tips and strategies for Total War Warhammer 2 online multiplayer. Anyways, GG to Ninya here. Those games were really fun, and really appreciate you for spending the time to play against me. Now let's end the battle with one final post-battle screen analysis. For the Tomb King's army here, the Skeletons were able to delay the push of the Savage Orcs, although most of them got destroyed by the simply superior Greenskin infantry. And Ninya here did a great job in blasting away my Cavalry Guard using the Brain Burster, as well as the charge from Grounded Punch and also the Stone Trolls here, putting in some massive HP damage to these elite infantry of the Tomb Kings before they can do too much damage to the Greenskin infantry. The rest of the Tomb Gods did a little bit better, with these Tomb Gods able to delay the push of a lot of Greenskin infantry, and these guys were just protecting the backline, chasing down the Stone Trolls, being almost completely healthy in the end, did some decent damage value. The Skeleton Archers simply get ran over by the Greenskin infantry and also being destroyed by the Orc Airboys, the overwhelming firepower. However, in the mobility game, I was doing much better, with the Ninya Horsemen being able to push off all the Forest Goblin Spider Riders, the Skirmish Cavalry, and whatnot. Even the Skeleton Horse Archers were able to get some kills in melee. However, they did not do too much damage here, as they are not the greatest melee combatants, while the Ninya Horseman was able to fight off the mobility and hunt down the Orc Airboys. And of course, one of the MVPs of this game, the Cascade of Souls here, 1468 damage, a lot of kills, and also a chevron. It was vital in blasting away all the Orc Airboys, focusing down all the Savage Orcs, weakening the infantry advantage of the Greenskin forces, allowing me to have a much better time in denying the push of the Greenskins. Now for the leadership, of course, Toon Prince getting 1200 value. Most of them is actually gotten by pushing Grom the Paunch away, as he was routed off by Archon the Black. And Archon the Black, the combination of Spirit Leech and melee attack against Grom the Paunch, and also fighting against the Orc Shaman, the Stone Trolls, gave him 1586 damage value. Honestly, for a caster, this is really impressive. As for the Greenskin army, Grom the Paunch there being routed off early with some really unlucky dice rolls, as Archon the Black was able to put some very effective attack against Grom the Paunch. So I would say Ninya actually probably lost because of some unlucky RNG, and Grom the Paunch wasn't able to do too much damage in this battle. As for the Orc Shaman, some nice damage with the Brain Burster on the Capra Guard, and in the end hunted down Archon the Black in revenge of his leader. A Goblin Big Boss, mostly there for the melee debuff ability, but not able to do too much damage. The Savage Orcs did a great push, getting a lot of kills against the skeletons, and in the end their push got stamped by the Tomb Gods as well as the bombardment from the Cascade of Souls. Same goes for the Orc Airboys. The artillery is just simply too much for them and being pushed off before they can even do too much damage. Mobility wise, Ninya did some mistakes with the Cavalry, rather recklessly throwing in the Goblin Wolf Riders and the Spider Riders, allowing my cavalry to catch them early in melee combat and shattering the Wolf Riders, shutting down the Goblin Riders, eliminating the mobility threat early, giving my Cascade of Souls a rather safe environment to keep firing. Stone Trolls did some massive damage to Archon the Black, almost able to use their mass advantage to push into my backlines, but in the end was basically pinned down by my Tomb Gods and also being distracted by Archon the Black. They were not able to hunt down the damage dealers of my army here, the Cascade of Souls, who was able to do some massive damage in the end. And that is basically it for today's best of 7 battle. It was a rather long video, so I do really appreciate your viewership. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.